It was so nice. This is the best looking event I've ever been to. It was way too early for me. It's overdone. Could be worse. He didn't comment. This is the best looking event I've ever been to. Your lips parted in a wondrous smile as you took in the decorations, and the guests all dressed to the nines. Cove met your eyes with a similar look on his face. You got the impression that he felt the same way about it all. The sound of Cove's name being called out echoed over the din of the room. When you looked around, there were a couple of unfamiliar people coming over your way. They headed over to greet Cove, giving you both a welcoming smile and hello. We're glad to see you came. You can make it, Cove, especially after all the hard work you've done to help make this day happen.
Of course.
Definitely, I wasn't gonna miss it. You must be Z. Cove had mentioned you often. It's so nice to finally meet you. Yep, that's me. When you looked at Cove for confirmation, you saw he was running his toe along the ground, his face flushed red. Z and we've known each other a long time, since we were just kids. That's wonderful. There's nothing like old friends. Yeah. Cove, we have to thank you for everything you've done for Orca. You're always welcome to join in on more activities when they come up. You too, Z, if you ever decide that's something you're interested in. You nodded your head in understanding, giving a small smile. Well, we better head off to greet the other guests. It was lovely speaking with you both. You all said your goodbyes, and they faded off into the crowd, leaving you and Cove on your own once more. Cove shrugged, and eyes darting around the place with an awkward look.
So...
I guess we can talk to more people. There isn't much else to do at this event like this. You found your way into groups of people who were standing around chatting while some light music played in the background. Servers with large silver trays were gliding between the guests, offering drinks in canopies? I'm not rich. Cove approached various people as you wound your way through the guests. He managed broaching a new conversation as well. You were enjoying talking to so many different people, both guests and members of the organization alike, and found yourself enjoying the company. The sound of microphone crackling came from the podium at the other end of the room. Someone who you assumed must be the host for the event was asking everyone to sit down in preparation for the meal and speeches. You and Cove looked for your table, finding it easily enough by the little name cards that were placed delicately beside the napkins. A few others joined at the table, though they weren't anyone that you recognized. The host was still speaking as people were settling, starting off the speeches by giving a welcome to everyone attending. She went on to provide some more information about Orca, which you suppose was for the guests who weren't a part of the organization, and the purpose of the fundraiser tonight. Orca's goal, as she explained, it were to aid in the conservation and restoration of oceans and beaches. There were many people who had helped to make the group as successful as it was. When she read off a list of several volunteers who worked on many of the events, Happen and Cove's name was one of the first to come up. His chest puffed out in pride at that. As she continued on to thank the large donors for the event, you checked over at Cove. He was still grinning happily to himself and tapping his fingers over the top of his knees, pretty pleased to have been mentioned by name. You laughed quietly as a reaction. You rolled your eyes. You're excited for him. You tried to keep focus on the speech. You were excited for him. He had worked so hard to make this event happen. It was the least that he deserved. While the host continued speaking, multiple servers dressed in black were setting the first course of the menu in front of the guests. One of the servers set down a plate in front of you, and you thanked them quietly before looking over the dish with interest. You recognized the dish as simple Caesar salad. I would not look at it with interest. I hate salad. The host quickly wrapped up the end of the speech, thanking everyone once more before inviting you all to begin your meal. Anyone who had included a special dietary note when signing up for the event received a vegan or vegetarian version, and there were also small baskets of bread set around the table. You ate both salads and the bread. You just ate the salad. You just ate some of the bread. You didn't eat any of it. You just ate some of the bread. Cove wolfed down his salad before munching into a breadstick, quickly devouring that as well. I hope the next part comes out soon and is bigger. You could hear him mumbling to himself as he reached over for another piece of bread. He glanced around the table and you followed his line of sight with curiosity, noting that everyone else was still eating the salad. Stopping his ham mid-air, he quickly pulled back and rested it on his lap, without taking another breadstick after all. It was clear that he was starting to feel unsure of himself, and he looked a little out of place here. He folded his arms and turned away from them to you. You didn't like the salad? I'm saving for the main course. I don't really like Caesar salad. I like Caesar salad, but this one doesn't look very good. I'm not very hungry. I don't really like Caesar salad. I get it. His gaze remained purposely tunneled on you, as if he was trying not to even think about what the rest of the table might be doing. You gave Cove a pat on the head. You made a silly face at the other guests while they weren't looking. Picked up a breadstick and gave it to Cove. You discreetly flip the other guests off. That is actually something I would do in high school. But we're not in high school anymore. You sat there quietly, feeling uncomfortable with yourself. Let's see. What would I do? I'd probably just sit there quietly, feeling uncomfortable yourself. Cove gave a bent smile and rolled his eyes at the others. It was a little funny. At least the two of you were both fished out of water here. It wasn't much longer until the main course was arriving, and the various chicken, steak, and veggie dishes were being served throughout the room. A ray of scents wafted through the room, making your mouth water. You had chosen the steak. It was nice that you had been given the option of how you liked your steak cooked, and the meal on the plate in front of you seemed perfect to your taste. That sounds amazing. Cove had gone for the steak, and once he had started to dig in, he was completely absorbed by his meal. You're gonna choke if you keep inhaling your food like that. You kicked him under the table. You flicked something at him while he was set off guard. You focused on your own food. I probably just focused on my own food. I love food. It was going to be a full evening, so you wanted to try eating something while you could. Dinner eventually ended, and last of all the desserts, a lemon sorbet that had been partially dyed blue. The mix of the white with the bold streaks of blue made the little scoops look like a ball of roaring ocean waves. The effect was very pretty, but the serving size was small. Perhaps it was the price to pay for the artistry. He turned to Cove, kind of pouting a little at the size of it. Seeking into dessert, it took him only a few bites to polish it off. Again, the other people around the table had barely even begun eating. An unimpressed air settled over him as he sat back in his chair, sipping at his water unhappily. You should appreciate what you got. You laughed at his moping. You are such a big baby. We can get more dessert later. You cleared your throat. We can get more dessert later. You gave him an encouraging smile. He looked up at you sheepishly, embarrassed to have been caught sulking over such a thing. He fumbled for a defense. It was just really good, that's all, and now it's gone, but I'm okay. With a slight grin, he shrugged to show that he was really fine. Would you like a bite of mine? Do you want my dessert? Alright, Cove, I'm not giving up my dessert. I mean, it's lemon. It's lemon, right? I can give him my dessert. Do you want my dessert? You pushed the dish towards him, and his eyes widened in surprise. He looked down at the dessert and then back at you, as if wordlessly asking if you were really sure. It's okay. You can have it. He hesitated a moment before pulling the sorbet in front of him with a small smile tugging at his lips.
Thanks.
You're welcome. He scooped up a spoonful of the treat and put it in his mouth, humming happily. You felt satisfied knowing he enjoyed it much more than you would. You leaned back in your chair, looking around quietly. After a moment or two, you felt Cove giving you a sidelong glance. He then took another spoonful of the faux ocean and held it for you. Your stomach began to flutter, and not from the prospect of sorbet. I guess I'll do it. You ate the sorbet. Leaning forward, you ate the dessert from his spoon, enjoying the bright, citrusy taste on your tongue. I would not enjoy it. I'd be like, it's lemon, but I had to eat it because it's my boy. It's good. Yeah. Another person from the orca got up on stage to make a speech as everyone was nearing the end of their meal. They spoke mostly about the individual projects that the organization was working on and their plans for the near future, as well as encouraging anyone who was interested to consider volunteering. Cove bent forward over the table with his chin balanced on a hand, listening attentively to the words. As they came to a conclusion and everyone gave them a round of applause, Cove caught your eye and smiled. You wondered what would happen now. And then the lights dimmed. A couple of spotlights came on, projecting a water light effect around the room. The guests gushed over the ambiance, and you looked around with wide eyes at the ripples on the walls. The DJ that had previously been playing some soft mood music in the background, announced that the floor was open for dancing, slowly turning the volume up so it drifted through the space. When he glanced at Cove, his eyebrows had shot up, and he mumbled quietly. I didn't know there'd be dancing. I guess it makes sense now that I think about it. He gave me an awkward laugh as you both watched as people rose from their seats. It was clear now that many of the donors were couples. A small crowd had started to form on the dance floor, and the DJ played a romantic song to get everyone started off. Cove let his gaze float over the small sea of guests, and he seemed lost in thought. A serious expression had settled on his face, making his eyebrow dip. Slowly he turned to you, though there was something cautious in his approach.
Well...
There it is. would you want to dance with me? I'd love to. I was just going to ask you the same thing. I don't really want to dance. I'd love to. His face lit up, you could tell, even beneath the dim light. He nodded firmly as he rose from his seat, but you noticed his hands shaking at his sides. You walked out onto the floor together, hesitating a little when you turned and stood face to face. Cove had a hard time meeting your eyes, but he lifted a hand for you to take, unsure of what else he was meant to do. You accepted his hand easily and gave him an encouraging smile. It took some doing, but amidst your nervous laughter, you managed to find a comfortable enough position and set a rhythm to the music. It was quite nice after that. Every time your eyes met, Cove, he would look away quickly, but he seemed to be enjoying the dance nonetheless. Eventually, he felt comfortable enough to speak. A lot has happened, huh? You nodded faintly. You weren't sure if he meant just today, this summer, or your entire time knowing each other. But it didn't really matter. It was true either way. Thinking back on the years that you and Cove had been neighbors, it was difficult to even try to reflect on it all at once.
I'm so glad.
We ended up here. He gave you a soft look, and you beamed, knowing that could also mean many things, but from his tone, you were certain he didn't only mean here at this event. It was more than that. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, so I think we have to tell your dad thanks. You couldn't even speak. You chuckled and happily at the two of you and the long adventure you've been on. I think we have to tell your dad thanks. Probably. The party eventually started to wind down, and at least it came to an end. When the main lights turned on, you blinked against the brightness of them, making sure you still had Cove in your sights. One final speaker came up to the podium on the stage, thanking all the guests for coming and wishing everyone a good night. It was bittersweet to see it come to a close. Your time with Cove here was precious. At least the memories could be brought with you. Given the space one more look, you walked together with Cove out to the parking lot. The other guests were doing the same thing, so you got stuck in a bit of a crowd. The Cove was so tall you could always see him, and it was easy enough not to get separated. The parking lot itself was quite big and even more noticeable now with fewer cars blocking the view. It took a little while to actually locate Cove's car across its expanse. Eventually you found it, and the two of you bundled inside the vehicle and buckled up. The trip home was quiet as you both silently reflected back on the experience. The event had been the biggest night of the year for Orca, and now it was all over just like that. Outside your window, the surroundings soon became familiar, and you found yourselves back in your neighborhood. Cove pulled the car into his driveway and put into park before letting out a relieved breath. Home sweet home. Yeah. As you come out of the car, you walked slowly down to the road, Cove coming over to stand beside you. You stopped in the middle of the street, right between your house and his, and turned to him, finding him in the process of opening his mouth to speak. Strangely, he clamped his lips together as though he had suddenly thought better of it. You also stayed silent. That was quite a night. Good night, Cove. Thank you for taking me tonight. This was kind of awkward. That was quite a night. Cove let out a breathy laugh and nodded in agreement. Yeah, it was. You stepped in for a hug. You ruffled his hair playfully. You gave him a friendly nudge. You patted him on the shoulder. You waved goodbye. We can hug. You went forward and wrapped your arms around him, and he returned the gesture, squeezing tight.
Night.
With a last wispy smile, he left toward the front door. Figuring you shouldn't linger in the street for much longer, you crossed the remainder of the road and did the same. When you reached your house, you pulled out your keys and stuck them in the door, trying your best to be silent about it. Opening the door a crack, you turned back and looked at Cove from over your shoulder. Your eyebrows lifted in surprise as he was doing the same, holding his front door open but waiting for you to go inside before he did. You shared an amused smile before you both stepped into your own houses, locking the door behind you. It was quite late, so everyone else was already asleep. As quiet as a mouse, you tiptoed up to your bedroom and changed out of your formal clothes into your pajamas. Now that you were finally home, you're exhausted, you brushed your teeth and get ready for bed in darkness before crawling under the covers and letting out a heavy breath. It was still strange to think about how that was it. The build up to the event had felt like so much. Now it was completely behind you. Your mind was busy with rapid yet muddled thoughts as you faded closer and closer to sleep. As unconsciousness creeped on upon you, you felt more content. It was a big deal, but there'd be more in the future. You could accept what it had been, and you could dream about what you'd get to experience next. And then you were taken away from the dream, right back into reality by a sound. He's always coming over. Your eyebrows pinched together, fully unprepared to be part of the waking world again. The day was over and had been an eventful one. But you heard another noise. It was a tapping. Your eyes flew open. The window. There was a tapping that came from your window. Cove Holden.